Let's settle down, let's settle down. Where is our able timekeeper? Has he mobilized you? The timekeeper is the one who is late. He's coordinating. Let me check on. Where is Mr. Dede? Timekeeper Jengia. Don't worry, we'll get you a bell. We'll get you a ringing bell. This side is okay. Only that side, your side. So I'll hand over the program to Director Compliance, Mr. Owira, to take over.
I hope you had a good tea break or coffee break, whatever it is. And now we want to delve deeper into the real gist of the matter in regards to the issue that has been there in the financial landscape, and this is cybersecurity. In one way or the other, either we've been hit or we will be hit in some days, and therefore there is a need that we need to put in checks and balances so that our institutions are well protected. And because of this, we've managed to invite the key speakers, both from the Central Bank of Kenya and of course from Safaricom, who will share with us their experience, and of course they'll also allow us to ask them questions for the sake of getting it better in regards to the subject matter. Allow me to introduce the first speakers, but before that, you note that our loaded program is a bit off the time, the way it was programmed. There is no harm. We are at noon. Ideally at noon, we ought to be going on with Safaricom presentation. We'll get there. And as my colleague Yvonne had briefed you, we were given two options by the hotel in terms of how we can keep ourselves comfortable with their services. One option was to stick to our program and probably go for lunch between 1 to 2. The only problem with that option is that they have quite a number of guests, and therefore we would face a long queue for us to get the service. That was option one. Option two was for us to delay a bit, probably go for lunch at around 1:30 or 2 there. Then we'll have the services all for ourselves, and we thought that was the most attractive option that we need to go with. So that gives us a good opportunity to listen to our speakers. Allow me to introduce Grace Ogao. She's an employee of Central Bank of Kenya as a data analytics and RegTech specialist, and as part of the technology team at the supervision department, of course at the regulator of the banks. Grace handles on-site and off-site ICT surveillance and inspection of the banks, microfinance banks, CRBs, and of course other institutions. I'm assuming these other institutions could be like Forex. She also undertakes the risk review of products prior to approval by the bank. And this risk in this context is the ICT risks. She participates in the fintech and innovation policy and regulatory issues. And she also represents the bank in National Kenya Computer Incident Response Team. That's basically Cybersecurity Committee. So from her, we are going to tap in a wealth of knowledge and experience as far as the cybersecurity issues are concerned. She has a colleague, Musili Frederick, who is the head of digital forensic and incident response. His work entails cyber research, incident response, containment, eradication, and recovery. He's also a leader in identification of indicators of compromise, IOCs. He'll explain to us further The beauty with ICT, guys, they have terminologies that confuse us, yet they are simple if they explain. Is also responsible for post-cyber attack support. Post-cyber attack support, I love that, to the affected institutions. Is a certified digital forensic and incident response practitioner and trainer. So allow me to welcome them with a round of applause. And Grace will be the first to go, followed by Frederick in that order. I know the questions will be itching, but in terms of order, I'll request that we allow all of them, including Safaricom, to go through the presentation as we take notes. Then now we'll have a chance, at least for Q&A. Will that be in order? So you just keep on notes. We'll get the presentation from the three presenters. Then they'll sit and we'll be able to ask them. Karibu sana, Grace.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Ogawa, as has been mentioned. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Peter, for the warm introduction and for the warm welcome. So I am a data analytics and RegTech analyst, and the work that we do at the Central Bank of Kenya has clearly been introduced, so I will not dwell too much on it. Today, I was delighted when I heard that people are very much interested in learning about cybersecurity, data protection, and many other issues. So I believe we are in the right place at the right time, and we have the same agenda. I'm also a Sacco member for a very long time, and the work of Saccos cannot be overstated. It is a very important work that you do, so keep up the good work. I believe the reason we're here to discuss about cybersecurity is because this is an issue which, if not well handled, can easily affect any Sacco of any magnitude, whether you're big, whether you're small, whether you're medium-sized. Cybersecurity is an issue that affects each one of us, so it's important that we actually talk about it. So this is the outline of my presentation. Basically, I'll introduce just the topic of cybersecurity so that we are on the same page. I don't know if this cable is working, but oh well, we'll continue. I'll introduce the topic of cybersecurity and basically give an overview of broadly what we have seen in the cyber risk landscape globally, regionally, and even within Kenya. Then after that, we'll talk about how as CBK we have collaborated with other stakeholders to mitigate cyber risk in the financial sector. And then lastly, we'll dwell on the key lessons that we have learned in the process. Of course, this is an information sharing endeavor, and the whole purpose is so that we learn together. The importance of learning cannot be, should always be emphasized. Yeah, we tested this thing and it was working. But technology sometimes happens to do this just when you need it. It has probably happened to some of us before, right? Therefore, this is not a cyber issue, but just to be clear, we are not under attack. But oh well, the importance of being prepared for recovery and response, as has been demonstrated, I believe we will shortly recover. The response is ongoing. So allow me to just continue with the presentation.
Or we can give you 2 minutes so that they work on it.
Yeah, sure.
It's always good and easier to read as you present. So let's just give the technical guys some 2 minutes. Will that be in order? Okay. Just be patient. We are trying. We've succeeded. It's just a matter of transferring the documents. Then we are on.
So we have done our contingency, we have implemented the contingency plan, and shortly we will see if it is working. The recovery time objective was what? 6 minutes. Thank you, Presta. We will continue. We are back on track. So, as I said, this is the outline of the presentation. We are basically talking about an introduction to what we mean when we say cybersecurity and cyber resilience. And I'll just go straight into it. When we talk about cybersecurity, we are talking about the preservation of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets, as well as information systems. And when we are talking about cyber resilience, on the other hand, it's the ability of that organization to continue carrying out its mission by anticipating threats and adapting to those threats and any other relevant changes in the environment. So when you say cyber resilience, you will hear people talking about the two interchangeably, but what really is happening is cyber resilience is more broad. It's more about even if you're attacked, are you able to withstand that cyber attack? Are you able to recover? Are you able to continue carrying out operations after that? So cyber resilience is, we say, must extend beyond IT. Previously, a few years back, people would think that when you're talking about cybersecurity, you are talking about IT only. In fact, people would hear cybersecurity and push the agenda direct to IT people. But now that is not the case. Cybersecurity is a team effort, it is a team sport, and it involves everyone in the organization. So when you talk about cyber resilience, we must talk about people, we must talk about culture, and we must talk about processes. Because if any of these three areas are affected, you cannot say you're fully resilient. So I will basically give an overview of what we have seen in terms of a cyber risk landscape, and this is post-COVID. These are the leading trends that we have seen. Prior to COVID, of course, a lot of institutions were working from brick and mortar. A lot of institutions were, especially within Kenya, if you have to work, you go to work. The gig economy was there. A few people were working remotely, but not quite everyone. So, test. Just checking. You're hearing me well? Everyone is hearing me well? Okay, let's continue. So what we have seen with COVID is institutions are forced to accelerate their digitalization processes. A lot of people were told you cannot continue working from the office if you are not essential service providers. And therefore, because you wanted to continue operations, what do? Immediately think, how can you offer our services and products digitally? So a lot of institutions moved towards that. We also saw a move to cloud-based services. When in 2019, the Central Bank of Kenya held the Afro-Asia FinTech Festival, and as part of that process, we held a hackathon. One of the winners of the hackathon was actually a FinTech that is in the Sacco space. Their role is to digitize Saccos. So they were telling us that because they offer a cloud-based service, a lot of Saccos were also interested in their solutions around the time when the pandemic started. But we also saw institutions, not just beyond the Saccos, the financial sector, even the education sector. Most people are now moving to cloud-based services. And cloud-based services means you no longer have to maintain your server rooms, you no longer have to maintain your infrastructure. Imagine having hardware and your service provider cannot travel from another county because Nairobi is locked down. Or your service provider cannot even show up because of the whole working from home protocols, the COVID protocols. It was quite an interesting time, and we saw a lot of people move very quickly to digitize, very quickly to cloud. And as my colleague Fred will talk about it, because to some extent we saw that the rush towards digitization, in that rush a few did not consider the cyber implications, the cyber risk implications. Again, we also saw changes in working practices, as I've mentioned, work from home protocols. Now we talk about virtual meetings, hybrid meetings. In fact, this year is the one where we have seen more people move towards fully physical events. Otherwise, if this was happening last year, chances are it would be hybrid with a few people in the office and most other people virtually. We also saw the gig economy expanding. The gig economy is basically what we see with especially our young people who are able to work from home. They're able to, for instance, do programming from home. They're able to pick one job after the other. They can take on this job today and then finish it and do another one tomorrow. And so they even work for multiple people. They're not even employees rather. They work more like consultants now. And then we also saw changing customer trends as a result, again, of the pandemic. Customers now preferring to have no contact at all when obtaining financial services and other services. For the financial sector, we saw, for Kenya, we are pretty much advanced in terms of digitalization, especially for the financial sector. But during COVID, what we saw was a shift in preferences to anytime, anywhere financial services. What would happen previously is these services were available, but a lot of people would still want to sort of walk into the bank, walk into the Sacco to obtain services. But as a result of the pandemic, I'm sure most of you will testify that even your customers would ask whether it is possible to do any of these things digitally. And some of you moved fully digital. Again, the other trend that we saw was proliferation of online services. People now shop on Jumia and other platforms. The first thing that people think about even when ordering services, even for the supply chain, is it something I can do digitally, or must I go somewhere to obtain the services? So we saw a change in terms of retail, in terms of e-commerce, and also education. For some schools, not all schools definitely, but for some schools they're able to move to digital education, move towards virtual education, rather providing education services virtually, and especially so for the higher education. They ended up even doing exams online, and so on. So from this, what we have seen in the last 2 years in terms of the cyber risk landscape, and these are practical examples of some of the cyber attacks, just an overview that what happened in the last 2 or so years. We noticed that the financial sector was actually a key target of cyber attackers. And the reason is very simple. Any financial service provider means there is possibility of getting money. And there are people whose role is to wake up in the morning and think, how best can I get this money from this Sacco, from this bank, from this microfinance institution, without working too hard for it? Previously, we used to say that hackers would hack systems, but that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of research, a lot of time. Nowadays, hackers prefer hacking people. And I'll talk about it in the next slides. Hacking people means you want to look at the institution and profile and say, who is the person who is likely to have the most admin rights, who is the likely target here. And then you target that person through social engineering, through social media, through email, so that they somehow end up giving you that information. And eventually now cyber attacks happen. What happened on the global perspective, from a global perspective, just last year, Robinhood, which is a trading platform in the US, was attacked. And what they lost was data of 7 million customers. Now, loss of data means you still have the data, but it's actually exposed to someone else. And this is personally identifiable information, which is critical, which can actually be sold to other people who then will want to exploit it for financial gain. The colonial pipeline attack. There's a pipeline which was supplying oil in some parts of the US. It was attacked, and it was a ransomware attack. For ransomware, what happens is you see a screen like this. If the ransomware is installed and it runs, and it is installed and run, what happens is the screen displays a message usually from the hacker. They will tell you, you have been hacked, send this amount of money in Bitcoin. So these people ended up paying 4.4 million USD, and the pipeline was shut for 6 days, simply because they could not get, whatever attack had happened, they could not get over. They could not supply services to their customers. Their technology was actually running part of the pipeline, so they could not get away from it. Again, we have become very dependent on technology. So again, I'm just emphasizing the need to take cybersecurity matters seriously. because I don't think there's any business right now which is running purely without technology. There are very few in the world, if any. So they're just the emphasis on that. Again, Kaseya, that was an attack on a supply chain. What they did, Kaseya provides managed services to clients. Managed services means they are the IT people that supply the IT people who supply their clients. For example, if you want to, say, install Microsoft Office, you can go directly to Microsoft, definitely. But because of the whole installation, maintenance, upgrades, and so on, a lot of institutions would prefer not overthinking that process. Instead of hiring one person to do that, you get a firm that is the role that they do. So you pay that firm to do that role, and that firm, of course, now is working with Microsoft. So in this case, Kaseya is now on the other end, which is supplying the IT service providers, who again are supplying virtual private networks, virtual system administrators to their clients. So you can imagine just the magnitude of it. If you attack one person who is supplying 10 other people who are supplying 40,000 or 50,000 clients, and these are corporate clients, you've not even talked about the corporate clients and their customers. So you can imagine how big it was, and so many people were affected. Again, in Germany, there are some banks which were hit by a distributed denial of service attack on their IT service provider. In this case, it disrupted more than 800 cooperative banks. All of us here, we are from the Saccos. Imagine if your bank is affected, what business are you conducting? How are you disbursing funds to members? How are you collecting funds from members? So this happened in Germany just recently in 2021. In 2020, the SolarWinds hack, which was, it received quite a lot of attention. SolarWinds, again, is a technology service provider, had supplied their technology to a lot of prominent institutions, among them the US government, Cisco, Intel, and again, it was one of those attacks that where it was not really ransomware, but they installed malicious code. We usually tell people to test their security patches before you update. You don't just go and update because there's an update available. You need to test it. So I know some people tested, some people it slipped through because it's a new thing again. Testing is not. Hello, you are our customer. You are FOSA account A. We have seen this activity, and they'll even tell you the activities that have been in that account. Why? Because they actually have obtained that information. So they have not robbed the Sacco directly, but they have gone to rob the customer. Data is the new oil. Data is very critical at this point. So even when you're talking about cybersecurity, we also need to remember data protection is part of cybersecurity. Regionally, we saw a hack in Uganda on their mobile money. Again, it targeted one of the service providers for two firms, MTN and Airtel. And the estimated loss there is $3.2 million US. You can see the numbers which are there in the millions of dollars. It's not thousands or hundreds, it's millions of dollars. The Rwanda bank heist in 2020, something happened, and a hacker had actually hacked a bank, collected money, which was reported as 22.5 million francs. South Africa, there's a credit bureau which had a data breach, and they ended up losing sensitive information for 24 million South Africans, 24 million people. You know, the problem with data is if it is exposed to the wrong party, you cannot change your name. It takes a process. You can technically, but it takes a whole process to change your name, your phone number, your account number, all those things. So 24 million customers were affected. And on a light note, in Uganda, but not so light, 2017, the students of Makerere University hacked the systems and they changed their exam results. So the nature of cyber attacks is quite diverse. It depends on what the attacker wants. So this is just a graph that shows how cyber attacks, the cyber events which have affected different industries from the time we started the COVID protocols in 2020. What we see is retail and manufacturing. They were not so much working from home, but manufacturing was actually a higher target of cyber attacks. On the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, as is expected, you see that education services, in terms of remote working, they are on the higher spectrum, but in terms of cyber attacks, not so much. And you can guess why. It's because you're dealing with children, possibly their teachers, you're dealing with people whose financial information isn't really so much there, even in terms of the volumes. You're dealing with people who, by the time you get to the money, it's such a process. They are educators, they are not financial service providers. On the other hand, financial service providers, we of course tried to work from home, but all financial institutions had a semblance of a hybrid work environment because you had to keep the financial services active for the members and for the customers. But the financial sector was actually a very big target and had a lot of cyber events happening. Again, professional, scientific, and technical services were attacked because during that time, you are very, very active in terms of working from home, but also very active in terms of obtaining funding to do their work and so on. So you can see most cyber attackers will always follow the money. They look where the money is and that's where they want to. But then, again, be very open-minded when it comes to cyber security. It depends on the motive of the attacker. So this is now closer home, what we have seen happening in Kenya. For the banking sector, we usually collect information. They send cyber incident reports for material incidents. And what we have seen is we do an annual innovation survey. And from the last 3 or so years, from 2018-19, in fact, for the last 4 years, all the commercial banks, microfinance banks, identify cybersecurity as a key risk when it comes to innovation. It has been one of the risks which has been very consistent. Every year they say cybersecurity is top of their priority. Again, what we have seen in terms of what the banks are reporting as cyber incidents, we have seen a lot of phishing attacks. Phishing is what I explained, where an attacker will want to send an email to obtain additional information from you. They'll want to, use easy means to sort of try and get information from critical people. So we see this happening with customers, especially those with the high account balances. And then we also see this happening with the IT staff, especially those who hold administration rights. So again, it goes back to basic cyber hygiene. If your institution has one IT person, who is the admin, who is the everything, they are the one who installs everything. If that person's credentials are taken, the possibilities are endless for that cyber attacker. As opposed to if you have several levels of, even if this one is admin, there's a maker checker level, sort of. So again, what we have seen for the financial sector is there have been reports of system vulnerabilities. Basically, a system vulnerability will happen because if you are using this system, hackers have discovered that there's a flaw somewhere that they can exploit. Sometimes it is as common as everyone in the world. For example, a few years back for WannaCry to happen, they exploited a vulnerability that was present almost everywhere across the world. That is why it spread very fast. Again, we also see supply chain risk, which I've talked about in the previous slides. As you can see, the attackers are becoming clever and they realize if they get to your supplier, they can get to almost everything that you have, especially if that supplier is critical. So we have seen a lot of attacks which are targeting third-party vendors. But we also note that the reason that happens is because perhaps the institutions have also strengthened internally their controls. So the only way of getting in, the easier way would be either through the staff or through a third-party vendor. So on the right, I will show the cyber threat trends for January to March 2022. And this is according to the Communications Authority quarterly report on cybersecurity. So Communications Authority noted they detected 79 million attempts at cyber attacks. And then out of those, malware was 37 million. Distributed denial of service was 19 million. Distributed denial of service means that whatever happens, whatever malware is installed, or sometimes they send packets of data to overwhelm your system. So you cannot access your system, your customers cannot access your system, no one can. It's basically you are not providing services, or you are just hanging. So that is distributed denial of service. Web application attacks, for those that have web applications, were 300,000 thereabout. And then system vulnerabilities, which I've also talked about, there were 22 million. This is compared to October to December, they were around 129 million. And before that, for July to September, it was on 43 million attempted attacks. So you can see the numbers are going down, partly because Kenya has really ramped up its effort towards improved cybersecurity. So this is about the mitigation. How then do we mitigate against cyber attacks? And I'll go back to what your director has mentioned, the role of leadership, and also what the CEO of Sasra has mentioned about the role of collaboration and also the role of working together and just finding ways of efficiencies, basically. So for the Central Bank of Kenya, one of the first things we did is we noticed that there was a leadership gap in terms of policy. So we instituted several guidelines. In 2012, we issued the ICT risk management guidelines. So the guidelines just basically gave the banks an opportunity, an overview of how then they can protect their information assets. And then in 2017, we issued the cyber security guidance note to the banking sector. This we followed in 2019 with guidelines on cyber security for payment service providers. The reason we issued these two guidelines was basically to ensure that the sectors are really focused on not just ICT risk management, but more specifically cyber security. So just an overview of what the guidance notes have. Number one was to make cyber security a key agenda of the board. So we can confidently say that the boards of all these commercial banks discuss, and even the payment service providers, they discuss cyber security within the board meetings. And then we standardize the approach to cyber risk management through formalized policy and governance frameworks. Previously, cyber security was at the discretion of the institutions. They would generally talk about ICT risk management, but not focus so much on cyber security. But this one mandated them to really think through their cyber security policies and even put in place policies and frameworks. Then the cyber security guidance note mandated them to tighten control of information assets. And then also it taught them to, it enabled them to embed good cybersecurity practices through training and awareness. We cannot overemphasize the role of training and awareness. Sometimes you put up the best teams together, they do their thing, but nobody else in the institution knows. And then cyber attackers, as I've mentioned, they're very clever. They do not go the usual route. Sometimes they look for that employee who does not know that their rights are very powerful. Sometimes they look for customers. So yes, and then finally, it also sought to establish risk assessment and testing assurance processes through internal and external audits. As the Sasra CEO has mentioned, the banking sector it is mandatory to have ICT audit as part of the external audit, and as part of the internal audit, it is mandatory to conduct ICT audit once every 2 years, and that has been going on for a while. And in terms of supervision, what the Central Bank of Kenya did is we realized that we need to ramp up our capacity to even supervise in terms of ICT risks. So the Central Bank of Kenya incorporated IT auditors and for on-site inspections. That's part of the work that I actually do. So, and then for the on-site examinations, we usually do on-site examinations of ICT. We include ICT as part of the inspection processes, previously to just be the financial side only. And then further, we also include vulnerability assessment and penetration tests as part of that surveillance process. And we also ramped up our skill set. We hired cybersecurity specialists. We hired forensic experts, like my colleague here, Fred, who then handle the forensic element of cybersecurity once a cyber attack has happened. What also we do for mitigation of cybercrime, we also collaborate with national agencies like the National Kenya Computer Incident Cyber Response Team, and we collaborate on threat intelligence and information sharing. So the KSAT is domiciled at the Communications Authority. Basically, they are the convening body, but the membership is drawn from different bodies, including law enforcement, central bank, financial sector regulators, financial sector players. We have even people from energy, people from academia. So we have a lot of people, and we meet once every quarter to just talk about what's happening in Kenya in terms of cybersecurity. If we notice a trend, then we know how it can be addressed and so on. And then, so the functions are to implement cybersecurity policies, laws, and regulations for the country. Early warning advisories. The KSAT usually issues advisories, sometimes even to individual institutions that they see if they notice that the institution is going to be attacked, and so on. And also just technical coordination for cyber response, especially when something is of national level. Again, on the issue of collaboration, we collaborate with the Joint Financial Sector Regulators Forum, which includes Sasra and other financial sector regulators. Under that, we collaborate in terms of information sharing. Recently, we had a cyber security conference, and we invited some of the regulators to join us for the conference so that we learn together. We also collaborate with the Kenya Bankers Association. Kenya Bankers Association has an ongoing campaign. It has been there for quite some time now. It is dubbed Kaa Chonjo. You have probably seen it. If you operate a bank account, you've probably received periodic messages from your bank telling you do not be cheated, and so on and so forth. If they notice something specific, the banks will issue SMSs to their customers just telling them, be very careful, we are not doing this, we will not call to ask you for your PIN those things. We collaborate with industry players such as Visa and MasterCard to hold some of the cybersecurity trainings for the banking sector and payment service providers. We also collaborate with SWIFT. SWIFT, we find that because of the volumes of money that can be sent through SWIFT, we collaborate to ensure that the banking sector is compliant with SWIFT attestations. We ensure that they are compliant in all aspects, even in terms of cybersecurity, and that they are alert to any threats affecting the SWIFT network. Then we also collaborate in terms of training and awareness, where we invite different stakeholders, especially in the financial sector, to participate in the Afroasia FinTech Festival, which we started in 2019. So during the festival, we usually have experts, cybersecurity experts, coming to talk to the audience about cybersecurity, and that's one of the areas in which we have seen a lot of interest. And finally, we also build national, regional, and global circles of trust. As a central bank, we have other central banks that we talk to directly on cybersecurity issues, because, of course, even us, we have our own payment systems, the regional payment systems, and so on. We also encourage collaboration among the sector. The Kenya banking sector has its own collaboration mechanism, so that they share information. Anytime there's a cyber threat or a cyber attack, they share information, and they're able to even tell. Sometimes when you hear that this bank has been hit and this is the attack, they usually go back and check, and they ensure that they are also not undergoing the same. And it has been a very helpful mechanism. So as a result, and they need an account to pass it through. So they know that SACCOs are FOSA accounts, which kind of operate similar to bank accounts, and they want to use those accounts to now mule money. And then we've also seen mobile money attacks, especially for some of those accounts. If you offer mobile-based loans, we have seen an increase in that. We've also seen payment card frauds for the SACCOs that offer payment cards to their customers. There's a lot of interconnectedness in terms of reliance on the banking sector for the card systems and so on. So sometimes they want to exploit that system. And then we've also seen supply. I think the biggest risk we have seen so far, again, is supply chain risk. We cannot overemphasize this, where your service providers, the technology service providers, are targeted. And when this happens, they know that your tech service provider has access to you. It depends also on the kind of service providers you have in your employ. Some of them are really good at even just mitigating cyber risks, but some of them are not so much. So what we are proposing in terms of mitigation is, number one, to prioritize cybersecurity at all levels. Cybersecurity is no longer an issue just for IT, it's no longer an issue just for management, it's for everyone within the institution. So we are also saying you need to conduct regular system tests and assessments. The role of internal audit, external audit cannot be overemphasized. And also, you need to hold your vendors to high standards of cybersecurity. Sometimes what would happen, especially in the banking sector, is once the vendors are onboarded, that's it, there's no other test. But now they periodically check. Some of them once every year, some once every 2 years. Message really helps them to stay alert. So what we notice is the key lessons that we have learned. Before we issued cybersecurity to the banking sector, there was limited ICT knowledge in the banking sector. There was limited cybersecurity awareness, and there was limited training as well. Further, the institutions lacked a strategic approach to cybersecurity funding, and funding was an issue, and the boards would not really sign off on cybersecurity investments, because even the boards didn't understand why they need to invest so much in cybersecurity. And we also noticed that there was a skills gap within the institutions. So basically, because the guidance note mandated the institutions to put in place internal audit, external audit, to even put in place CISOs who can manage cybersecurity at every institution, what happened is we have seen an increased budgetary support, because even now the board understands what cybersecurity is. And we have also seen increased board support for cybersecurity. We've also seen that board members are now being appointed who have a background in IT, so that they can also assist in that area. And then also we have seen an increased access to cybersecurity experts. Even where the boards have limited knowledge of cybersecurity, we have seen them going for cybersecurity training or asking experts to just beef up their knowledge on this. And then also we have seen that for the banking sector, the banking sector has invested in the cybersecurity skills of their own staff. And further, we have seen that the CISOs have been designated, as I've mentioned, just for overseeing the cybersecurity posture of the institution. And these are the 3 lessons that we have learned in our journey. It has been 5 years since we issued the guidance note on cybersecurity to the banking sector, 3 from the time we issued to the payment service providers. And we have noted that institutions need to cultivate a culture of cyber hygiene. If you want to be successful in cybersecurity, you need to first cultivate that culture. It's a culture because people are a very key element in the cybersecurity process. Also, institutions need to do continuous training and improvement, not just for their staff, but even for management, even for board members, even for their vendors, and even for their customers. And for their vendors, sometimes it should even extend to who is supplying the vendor. You have a vendor who is being supplied by another vendor. You need to know who these people are. You need to sort of drill down into those relationships and figure out who is behind the engine that is powering your technology. And so that you make sure that even them, they are fully aware of cyber risks. And then thirdly, collaboration. As the Sasra CEO had mentioned, we cannot overemphasize on the power of collaboration. Cyber security is a team sport. It does not take one, it takes everyone. Because if one Sacco is hit and the attackers are successful, they will most likely go to the next Sacco with the same thing. And we have seen this happening practically in the banking sector. You get an incident report today, it's on this issue. The next day, the same attack has been modeled in another institution. You see, if they were talking to each other, this would not happen. And because of the collaboration that's there in the banking sector, we can testify to the reduced number of cyber attacks in the banking sector. So yes, collaboration is key. Finally, this is just my parting shot, just the 3 issues which I want you, if nothing else, just take these 3 things with you. Please ensure that you train your staff, train your management, train everyone around you. The board of director, Mburu, who had spoken earlier, mentioned that the role of leadership. I believe the people in this room are the ones who are critical in turning this cybersecurity issue around, even for the Sacco sector. So it is up to you to ensure that you lead from the top. You ensure that this information goes all the way to the board and all the way to the employees, and even possibly to the customers where necessary, even to your vendors. So training is key. Just information sharing, learning, continuous training is key. Secondly, you need to invest in cybersecurity. Some of the investments that can be done, and part of the reason why people move to cloud-based services or shared services, as has been mentioned earlier, is because of the economies of scale. It might be very costly for one person to go for the best cybersecurity posture. But if you join hands together, this is something that you can do together. You can decide to form a team that helps all of you. You can decide to have a response team that helps all of you. You can decide on joint investments that will actually protect the Sacco industry. And thirdly, collaboration. The power of collaborating with each other. Do not hide. There's no shame in reporting that you have been hit by a cyber attack. That is something that people need to know. People, of course, the relevant people, not the media, maybe at some point, but the relevant people need to know that you have been hit, so that even them, they are not hit. If you don't talk to each other, the bleed might be greater than if you are talking to each other. So collaboration is key. Finally, this is the cost of cyber crime damage globally, and this was an estimate in 2021. It was estimated at $6 trillion USD annually. The FBI released a report sometime during the month that said the actual costs were 6.9 trillion USD. So basically, cybercrime is the 3rd largest economy after US and China. It's a very serious thing. So basically, this is what we stand to lose. For these few minutes I've been here, you can calculate how much has been lost. From the time we have been there in the morning, possibly it is, I don't know. The last one now is 684 million USD. It's a very serious issue. One attack has the potential of bringing an entire sector down. Cybersecurity is going to be at the forefront of every conversation for the next foreseeable future. I do not see this going behind the scenes. So the challenge to you is, how much will you invest in cybersecurity? How much will you invest in cybersecurity? Thank you. So I'll invite Fred to continue with his presentation. He's going to talk about the types of cyber attacks that we have, the actual cyber attacks that we have seen in the banking sector.
afternoon, team. Okay, I will talk about trends. Will be as brief as possible, but very precise to the point. Could be before we proceed. This is actual stats. We don't have names, but this is what is actually happening in the field. So nothing is lifted from anywhere else other than the actual data as it is from the nature of incidents that we have recorded. Trends, I will not dwell on this this simply, but how things are changing, because the bad guys today they are doing this, tomorrow they are doing something different. So that's an overview of what we're going to talk about. Okay, our categories will be based on the threat actors, of which are the attackers, the bad guys. And then we shall also look at the attack vectors and the cash out methods. Remember, all the planning, wherever is being done behind the keyboard, you need to get that money out of the system. I believe so. So we are going to actually discuss mainly on those three areas, the threat actors. Who are these? It starts with our internal staff, either by omission or commission. And then it goes to the outsiders, who are the operatives. So at least we are going to see more of this as we get into the discussion. Oh, the devil is there again. Oi, oi, oi. Back to your slide. Finished. Okay. So threat actors, these are like people we talk of, the perpetrators, the criminals. I've mentioned of the internal staff. Who are these? Sorry, before the interaction, I was talking about threat actors. Threat actors, you find that mostly there is an internal mall somewhere. There is the enemy within, either deliberately or accidentally. There is some form of a discussion. And then we are seeing these, that parties have been mentioned here. That's an angle. How does this come in? You find that that party guys, their loyalty to your organization, whatever they are doing, there is nothing like that. He has a job. When he's approached by the outside operatives for a deal, he's told, here we can strike 10 million in one weekend. No, and your share is 3M. So this guy will do his risk analysis, and you will be immediately convinced quickly and subscribe to the deal, just to give them either access at some wee hours of long weekend and so forth. So that means, and then we have also seen our students, interns within our organizations. Those are problems. So you need to evaluate the risk towards onboarding interns as students and so forth. We have also been a quick way of being approached by the operatives to open accounts and be able to have been used to exit cash. Cyber attack service. Somebody has mentioned that day by day, we are onboarding new systems, we are onboarding new staff. That increases our service, our cyber attack service. Because if today you have a banking app, tomorrow you're on USSD, tomorrow you add an app on it. So the fintech, the more diversity, the more diversification we do, the more we expose ourselves. That means we need to do proper risk assessment into the new ventures we are doing as organizations, because the bad guys will do the risk analysis for us and be able to exploit loopholes in our deployment and be able to victimize us. So this falls in form of either onboarding new people. When you onboard new people, how do you do? Orientation. You have to be taken through your cyber security policy. If it is there, if you don't have, please start there. And then the technology you have, as you deploy new techs, new systems, as you upgrade, please make sure you consider the risk you're exposing yourself to, and then be able to do the necessary remedies. If you're onboarding a new vendor, please do due diligence. Know their history, know where they have been doing, what they have been doing before, whether it is helping or rather whether they have bad record from their involvement. Then processes, procedures. From where we sit, we say that the process is what binds the two, people and technology. So what controls do you have? Your workflows. Are they in tandem with the technology and the process? Are they securing your setup, your resources? Those are questions to ask. So I've mentioned about applications. If it's USSD, vendors, do they have history of malpractice or otherwise? Then that means as we do whatever we are doing, we need to be very keen on security of whatever we are doing. If you are diversifying, onboarding any fintech approach, please, security is always important. My experience in the industry, I've seen a lot of issues happening during transition period. You are upgrading to a new system and the guys are there. The old system is not switched off, is still connecting to live. And guys will have their night there, will have their catch. Before you realize things have already gone. So these are key area, and everybody is trying to manage the new system. Simply, before you know, the old system is being used as an entry point, and things are not very good on your side. So we talk of a zero trust model. That is, you have to authenticate and verify. It's not that Musili is the IT manager, so we don't need to audit him. No. There should be a record of whatever I'm doing on the system. Is that clear? Yes. Whether you are the CEO, whether you are the auditor, whether you are what, nothing like trust. We need to have everything accounted for. If it's a vendor who is supporting remotely, let that be taken account of. That remote access should be accountable. It should be accountable for the time, for the actions it's doing on the system. Okay. Yes, we have talked. Sorry. I'm not a public speaker, so when you see me intending to run, understand. Okay, let's look at attack vectors, because we have looked at the first two, who are the actors and the other item. So, attack vectors, do you hear me? Okay, attack vectors, we talk of rogue devices. This happens because of porous network. Your perimeter is not watertight enough, it's not controlled. We shall discuss further on that. ATM jackpotting, This is simply because of software and hardware weaknesses at the ATM environment. SIM swapping, it's good we have a SAFCOM team coming immediately to share this. So SIM swapping is very common, but this happens when exiting money. Phishing link, OTP, these are for either while on the mobile banking app, you need to authenticate a transaction. So customers have been duped to sharing the OTP link as well as the OTP as well as the phishing link. We are seeing a lot of prepaid card fraud. These are a product by banks where you load money into the card. It's part of the alternate banking channel environments. We have seen some institutions being hit by ransomware. Social engineering, this is very interesting. You can imagine your customer care being tricked to share your customer members' details. Quickly, he or she will, this is what happened in this case, somebody surrendered customer details, and then now with the fraudster armed with the customer KYC data, you are able to get onto the accounts and do a lot of damage. Another one is also debit card fraud, a stock card profile on terminals, point of sale, PDQ devices. We are going to discuss this in length because these are some of the products you guys offer. Yes, this is a rogue laptop. Your network design is very important. You find some institutions are on a flat network. An IT-oriented person will tell you a flat network is like the entry to this hotel having one gate and one person, or rather one guard at the gate. Once you access through main gate, you have entry to every safe, every bedroom, every room in that house. So that's a weak point we have seen, because these guys, what they do, they use a cleaner, a security guard, or a complacent staff, and come with a laptop already configured, loaded with malicious tools. This laptop is connected to your LAN, the network, and because the network is not safeguarded, this laptop will be able to connect back to the attackers and give them access to your environment because it is already within your LAN. So I've said this is because of porous network. It leverages on assistance by internal staff. Any cleaner is given a deal, is told, you give us access, immediately we check out 10M and you have 5M. So the loyalty of our team, that's why we said don't trust anybody. A zero trust model. You have to authenticate and verify. Whether this is a CEO, whether this is a board member, or what. If you are board members and you have issued them access to your corporate network, please provide them with controls. We have had a case whereby an entry was through the computer of a board member, because a board member will not be that security conscious. When he gets to his or her home, the machine is given, the people around him can access the machine. So you can tell what next. No cyber hygiene. Jackpotting. ATM system, like any other system, has got hardware and software. So what we need in this case, the same basics for any clean system should be observed here. Yes, jackpotting has got some part of vandalism to get access to the ATM computer. But now once they get access to the ATM computer, if that computer, the system controls are okay, they won't be able to manipulate the ATM machine to get money, or rather to get cash out of it. That means this is a system which ought to be upgraded, patched like any other. Although I know most Saccos, you connect through, some are on themselves, others on Sacco link. I understand so. Yes, these are serious issues. It combines both security at the ATM place, physical security, as well as the logical security on the system side. Yeah, these things, yes, they are quite rampant. Even the previous one, the rogue laptop porous network was very common some time back in the banking industry, but of late is reducing. There's something we call MAC address binding. This machine in the network is known by its MAC address. So once you byte that, anytime you bring a foreign device, it will not be known. It will be estranged. It won't be authenticated into your network. SIM swapping, this is very interesting. We have a case study on this. I don't know. The other day in the papers, I saw the case of Kasarani SPD. That's a real story. It's a real story, not to him and to everybody. Anybody can be a victim, because if somebody starts harassing you with funny calls, you quickly switch off the phone. Target customers mostly on mobile banking. A mobile banking customer on mobile banking is a quick target for this. But this thrives with insider support. Are we together? Inside, somebody did not surrender the details, but the SIM card was swapped immediately. That means there was some conspiracy from the side of telco staff, because they assist you with swapping the line immediately. Okay, OTP. This is to authenticate. Somebody will call you. Thanks to some of the institutions, I've seen them sending messages. Nobody will call you to ask for this, for PIN or relatives. They go and look for people who come and apply for the prepaid cards. These people are sponsored. You are given 3,000, apply for the card, 500, have a deposit of 500. The rest is your payment, is your labor. Then immediately they do that, they surrender the card to the criminals. So criminals have got back-end access to the card system. So immediately they have like 50 cards. Those cards are loaded with non-existent money, which does not reflect. Immediately after that, this money is withdrawn from various destinations, not in the country, but out globally. Cards are Visa and Master. These are global networks. Is that true? Yeah, so in this case, this means our system security, our system sanity need to be on check. Okay, ransomware. The next is ransomware, and it's because of the background. Ransomware, what happens in the morning, you come in, no access, or you have been hacked, you have been breached. The reason behind success of ransomware is simply but cyber hygiene. Cyber hygiene cyber hygiene in the sense of the controls, people, process, technology. The systems you have are vulnerable. They can be hit anytime. You don't update, you don't upgrade. Yes, there is a cost implication, but as the CEO said, you need to look at what to do to solve this issue. Right. So I've talked about ransomware. Social engineering, voice phishing. I gave the hint of this bank staff. He was called by criminals and so, asked about this account. He gave all the KYC profile. Immediately after that, this criminal calls the customer, and the customer ATM withdrawals, M-Pesa ATM cheaper. So the merchants who are holding this point of sale were also institutions I've been to. Honestly, they do not have a stock of the assets they have, whether hardware, whether software. Nobody knows when these licenses expire. Nobody keeps track of patches, whether hot fixes or what. You find, yes, they acquired a system some 3 years back. The licenses have expired. So this is just but a white elephant. So these are some of the things we need to be. You need to know what is in your stock to protect. Then once you do that, you put measures to protect it. Issues of passwords, ring fencing, multi-factor authentication. If you have these 3 items, I know I have this 1 car, or I know I have 1 kid, I will put correct measures to protect that environment. Once you have correct systems to protect, once you have the correct systems to protect, that means whenever there is any unauthorized entry, you will detect immediately. That's how the cycle works. After you detect immediately, you are able to respond. After you respond, you recover. So there is no way you respond or you detect and respond and recover without having the correct protective controls in place. And the protective controls in place is having the right systems up to date, having your people aware, having the correct procedures in place, workflow controls. I mentioned this is what I've been talking. I've referred from NIST framework. This is available. And for CEOs, we might not digest this much. I don't know whether I'm supposed to make a recommendation, but the people who take care of your technology, please have a setup like this, which is more thorough. And I believe that will add value to the whole process. Okay, I've talked about people, I've talked about processes, policies, workflow, controls. I've talked about systems. Yes, these are very, very, very important in our setup. So I think in the interest of time, we shall discuss way forward during the plenary. Thanks.
I think it deserves a serious round of applause. We need to agree here, you know, you have to be sensitive when it is an adult education. We just need to agree. We briefed you that our lunch will be at 2 for the reason that we gave you. And we still have 1 more presenter. Will that be okay? So that we do the plenary after lunch. That will be fine. Okay, rather than if we break now, we still have some time. But since the topic is very interesting, I think we can do that. But somebody suggesting that you get 2 minutes just to stretch yourself, then come back. We continue. Wonderful. Now, then allow me to introduce Patrick. Patrick, you are in the house. You should be making your way here to the podium. Patrick Kinoti is the head of ethics and compliance at Safaricom, not at EACC. And is responsible for the fraud management and compliance. Patrick's role covers the company's fraud management and strategy, including corruption, bribery, and fraud prevention, detection, and investigation. He also oversees compliance for business controls, as well as compliance review of regulatory obligations, among so many others. So in the interest of time, I have a CV of 7 pages here for Patrick. We'll continue with it later. The rest, Patrick, come. So again, just take notes.
It's a privilege actually to be invited to this meeting. Mr. Njuguna, you must be very powerful to get over 100 CEOs in one room. Actually, only Kenyan who has money to do that, actually. I've never seen so many CEOs actually in one place. And I hope the CEO of my Sacco as well is in. I've never met him. His office is so high, actually, probably. Joseph, I'm not trying to pin you up. But I've never met, probably just meet. So we've been doing interactions with the Saccos for quite some time now. I think we've done since 2018 as an organization. Mainly every quarter we normally have meetings with the Saccos, not at your level, but the people who do the job for quite some time. And also we have meetings with some of your suppliers who we call integrators. And I think one of the most embarrassing questions we've been asked by Mr. Were, I saw him today, is that how do integrators come into your environment? And sometimes you don't answer, we just say, let's finish the tea, then we'll talk about that off record. But I think as Eric goes through the 2 slides, I think we'll try to keep these within the time. We had 45 minutes, we might have to chop a couple of minutes so that we can get on track, back on the track from a timing perspective. We are changing the landscape around the integrators, probably putting more stringent requirements on how we have around them. So when we started the banks, who are the initial partners in this. And they asked us a lot of hard questions. And we went back, looked at the platform, made changes onto it to make it more, what I call, easier to interact with, fast, of course, safe, and creating what we're trying to call now worry-free experience when you're interacting with that product, either at API level, or you're just doing the normal, the traditional, what I call web-based movement of the transactions. We do other things beyond the fraud, definitely on the one-on-one basis. What you normally do is, because I'm not saying you're perfect, you have a lot of problems actually, and maybe that's why we invited you to answer questions to our customers. But also we've done a lot of stuff actually to fix things. So on one-on-one basis, we could talk about the general risk management, things around data protection. We have our whole office that deals with that. The product development life cycle, which I think is the biggest problem actually I find with the Saccos, including the banks. But also we've seen a lot of maturity in how we develop secure channels for the customers. And what normally happens, I remember a couple of years, 5 years back, talking to the bank, we had an app. And the app could tell me whether I have an account in the bank or not, which was a bit what I call initial tech-led rather than actually a risk management led kind of development. Now, having said that, there might be balance between controls and convenience. Sometimes you put too many controls, you can't use the product. And that's one of the biggest struggle from our side, because you are in risk management saying, put this control, then the product simply can't scale, because it's just like we're walking into a physical interaction with someone for you to verify. But I do think as we go to digital as well, we can sleep easy. Okay, those few comments, I invite Eric. We'll still keep within probably the next 20, 25 minutes to just close out on what you're seeing from a fraud perspective, and then Ted will quickly run us through exactly what he's seeing from a cyber security monitoring perspective. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Mugo. I take care of fraud investigations in Safaricom. That role is largely an outward-looking role where we respond to fraud incidents, both internal and external, affecting our partners. In this case, the Saccos form a core part of our partners, but we also have banks as our partners and also other partners such as M-Pesa agents and dealers. So I have a graph there. I hope it's visible for those who are all the way up there. We decided just, a lot has been said actually by the CBK team on the incidents, and we agree with a number of what they have presented. And so mine is really specific to Sacco. What I have, these are incidents we either pick up on, of which majority of incidents affecting Saccos are detected by our fraud detection team. So we have a team that on a 24/7 basis monitors or does what we call transaction monitoring. So they are monitoring what's happening on the M-Pesa ecosystem, day and night, weekends, anytime they are monitoring, and they are the ones who normally pick up. And I'm sure a good number of you have received an email from this team asking you to verify some transactions. In that case, it's because of certain elements that we have seen. Well, I would say the advantage that we have as Safaricom is, and perhaps Ted will touch more on this in terms of monitoring, is that we also have visibility on traditional telecom lines. So when we start seeing money moving, and we can see money moving to certain lines, we're able to see when was this line registered, and there's a certain, I would say we've profiled numbers in a way to tell this is most likely a fraud. And if a certain number or set of numbers meet that particular criteria, then 100 million, we were able to recover about 40 million, and therefore the loss was about 30 million. In 2019, we see a sharp drop. There are some controls we co-opted. We started the forums where we would largely, and again, this loss was much higher for banks. If you look at the yellow line, that is the line for banks. I just put the targeted amount. You'll realize in 2018, in 2019, the value targeted for banks and subsequently the loss was much higher than Saccos. Now, you notice there's a drop in 2019, 2020, and actually for banks, there's a sharp drop because of the forums we started. Initially, the focus was on banks. They're the ones who are really pushing hard on this issue of mobile money. And we came up with controls, which of course we rolled out even to Saccos. So some of the controls were as simple as separating the pay bills, whereby the pay bill you have set up that is automated for mobile banking, we removed it from being accessed from the internet. And that's what we call pay bill separation. So we encouraged all organizations, move all your automated pay bills, which when I say automated, I mean the one that is run for your mobile banking service, move it to the API, which is more secure. We had the two-factor authentication for your web-based M-Pesa access. This was really actually the main contributor for 2018 frauds, where credentials would be compromised and on the web, and actually the fraudsters would log in from wherever they are on the M-Pesa portal web and move money. And thereafter, when you do the investigations and you ask the staff, they would say, well, I don't know who took my password. So we had to put two-factor authentication, and that fraud actually died. We've not had M-Pesa web, internet web fraud ever since we put two-factor authentication. The speaker from CBK also mentioned that frauds or cash withdrawals via ATMs has gone down. It's true. We eliminated that fraud as well, because we put what we call geo-restriction, meaning for you to withdraw money, M-Pesa, from an ATM, you have to be in the same geographical location as the ATM. So when we implemented that control, that particular channel of withdrawing stolen funds died. So if you look at 2020, 2021, you start to see the banks, the fraud targeted at banks goes down, but the one targeted at Saccos has kind of maintained. There's really no much difference. I wouldn't say it has maintained for this year though, because already, if you look at 2020, the targeted amount was 47 million. 2021, roughly the same amount. At 2022, again, roughly the same amount. The only difference is now we are in which month? We are in May. We are not even halfway through the year, and we are already at the same value, targeted amount as the previous years. So it's a bit worrying because it could mean that by the end of this year, we'll be looking at a much higher loss value. So I mentioned two-factor authentication as a control which we implemented, and that one we enforced to everyone. We didn't even ask whether you want to be on it or not. We just enforced it because it was absolutely necessary that we do that. Pay bill separation, we didn't enforce it, but we really did a lot of awareness across the teams, to the integrators, to anyone in technology, and gladly most of them actually did implement. ATM vicinity checks, we enforced that one, so that one there was no negotiation. SIM swap checker, a colleague has mentioned, it has been there actually for the last maybe 7 years. That control has been there, or the service. Initially it was free, it was for USSD, the uptake was slow. So the IMSI checker is just, maybe in simple terms, it's a way of enabling a financial organization to check whether a line has been swapped or not. So the free version was more or less telling you yes or no. It's like the Sacco asks Safaricom, has this line been swapped? And then Safaricom responds with a yes or no. And the feedback we got was this information is not really, it's good, but it's not helping us to make a decision. So we came up with a new version that was enriched. It gives the registration date of a line so that you're able to tell how old is this customer on our network. And it would give the swap dates. And it would give the yes or no that was being given in the free version. Again, that one, the uptake was not good. Why? Because of the pricing. That's the feedback we got at 20 shillings per call. So that one is still there, by the way, because if you want the red one, initially it was 5 shillings. We still got a pushback, so we reviewed again. So the current offering right now is you query. So the same, a financial institution queries Safaricom, has this line been swapped? Safaricom will respond with a date. If the line has been swapped within the last 90 days, Safaricom will respond with a date of when it was swapped. So the financial organization, a Sacco in this case, will decide if a line was swapped 2 hours ago and a line that was swapped 2 weeks ago, you decide what to do because the risk is not the same. If a line was swapped 2 weeks ago, there's a likelihood that the customer has already gotten back their line. If a line was swapped 2 hours ago, there's a likelihood the line is could still be in fraudster hands if it is not the customer who has swapped, because also majority of the swaps actually are not fraudster driven, they are genuine. People have lost phones, people want to upgrade SIM cards, people, there are many reasons why people will want to swap lines. So that's it on IMSI service. Then we have the umbrella solution. That's a free service that we offer as Safaricom, whereby you see what happens is, as Safaricom, what we give or what we offer to financial institutions is a pay bill. And this pay bill, what we call a B2C, business to consumer or business to customer, this pay bill is the one the Sacco will fund. And when the Sacco funds it, now the Sacco will instruct Safaricom, debit my pay bill, 2,000 shillings, and credit 2,000 shillings to the customer, to this number, 0722123. So that is all we see as Safaricom. We see money moving from your pay bill to a customer line. At that point, we cannot tell whether, for example, this customer is a Sacco customer or not. We can't tell. So Umbrella was a solution to try and bridge that gap, whereby we request the Sacco, can you send us an independent feed from your core banking solution so that we compare these two, and if they match, we release, we perhaps not release, but we are able to pick up on the fraud much faster. So all we are doing is comparing. If I'm being asked as Safaricom to remove 2,000 shillings from this pay bill and send to 07 to 2123, have I gotten a similar message from the core banking of that Sacco? If no, then I quickly know there's a problem and I'm able to arrest the situation much earlier. So umbrella enables us to detect fraud much, much faster than the way in which we do currently. So I just perhaps will pick up on, and this has already been mentioned by my colleague from CBK, so I'll just touch on one incident that happened early this year in February. It affected one of the Saccos, and this was done within the Sacco. So the fraudsters basically colluded with somebody within the Sacco and placed a laptop in one of the branches. And thereafter, this laptop had what we call a remote access software. So it was the laptop is connected to the network, but also is connected to the internet. So and it's running a software that enables the fraudsters to log in to the laptop and therefore to the network and reach to the mobile servers, or the servers that run the mobile application for the organization. And thereafter, they initiated, so once they accessed, because as you may know, the API, the M-Pesa API, and how it works is, it does not receive instructions from anywhere. It receives instructions from a trusted point. So it means that at the point of integration, at the point when your IT people are configuring the Sacco systems to talk to Safaricom systems so that your mobile banking service works, what they are actually doing is setting up a trusted point on your end. In this case, the end could be sitting in the Sacco systems, or it could be sitting in the integrator. So what fraudsters are always doing is looking for that point, that trusted point, because they know once they launch instructions from that trusted point, they know Safaricom will simply comply. Because we are not able to tell whether this transaction, and by the way, they mix up, because they don't shut down the normal service, because they don't want to attract attention to themselves. We've actually found ourselves in a scenario where when we realize there's a problem, we shut down and we will suspend any line that received money from this particular pay bill. And therein, we will find innocent people. While the attack was happening, there's a genuine customer who was pulling money to do their own biashara. And because we don't know as Safaricom at that point, so we suspend all the lines, and then we will send the same to the Sacco, and the Sacco will write back to us and tell us, these are genuine, allow them to access their money. The rest, hold. So these people initiated, that's what I'm referring to, parallel instructions, meaning while the genuine transactions are flowing through, there is somebody who is also initiating parallel. And for them to do this, again, it means that they have been in your network and they have had access to the credentials, because there are two sets of credentials that, and what are the learnings? Mine is, what are the learnings from this incident? Our biggest take away from this is that the way in which this particular organization responded, because this alert on there's an object, a foreign object in your network had actually been communicated to them. How they responded to it was perhaps not the best, and the laptop was still in their network and they were compromised thereafter. What mechanisms or processes do you have as an organization to respond to fraud incidents? Many of the times as Safaricom, we pick up on incidents, we send to the Sacco responds after 6-7 hours. Because why? Fraudsters will do this on weekends, at night. So what mechanisms to respond to fraud have you put in place as a Sacco? It's very critical, because it's the difference between losing 1 million or 10 million. How you how quickly do you respond? What do you have a set of plans or response mechanisms in which when you receive a notification of an incident, what will your team do? Very crucial in this case, had this organization had proper steps, they would have probably even prevented this fraud. Ted will talk more on cyber security, so I'll not touch on that. I can only say that before somebody gets to your core banking or your mobile banking solution, it means they are already in your network. So even as you look towards setting up transaction monitoring, remember that somebody needs to be in your network, meaning they are in your laptops, in your servers. Now that is an area of cyber security. So you need to ring fence that bit, even as you're working on transaction monitoring, which is very important and key because there are many other elements like money laundering that, and I'm sure somebody will touch on that. But, what steps have you taken to cover yourself from a cyber security? Because that is where you either ring fence or put the proper gates and controls before somebody, and when somebody is in, because they could also get in. Maybe they are being assisted by our own staff, which is, it's a societal problem. What mechanisms does your cyber security program have to detect the fraud? So this second slide is talking much on the same, just tracking what has been happening over the years. So I think I'll just leave it at that and request Ted to come and pick up on the other bit on cyber security. Thank you.
As they're sorting out the light, so I know I'm sitting between you and lunch, so I'll try to keep this as short and as precise as possible so that we don't have some hungry stomachs here sitting too long. So just bear with me, just indulge with me for the next about 7 to at most 12 minutes. So I think the lady from CBK spoke about cyber resilience. And what you're seeing here on the screen is how we think about security. From a physical security standpoint, this is how majority of you do security. In your houses, before you get into your house, or if you live in an estate or you have your own house, you have a gate. If you don't have a gate, for those who live in blocks or estates, you have the main gate that ushers you into that particular environment. So you normally lock that, or you have a watchman there. Then when you get into your own house, you have a grill. You lock the grill, you put a padlock. After you finish that, you have the door. Then you lock your door. Beyond that, you have your bedroom, where you lock your bedroom. So that is security in layers from a physical standpoint. The same concept also applies from a cyber security standpoint. How are you layering your security to protect your crown jewels, your key assets within your organization? And in you, as Saccos, what are your key assets? It's your data that you have about Kenyans or international people. Number 2, it's the money that you have. That for you is what you need to protect. So how are you layering security to make sure that if an attacker tries to breach that, they take the longest route possible, and also at the same time, you're able to detect them before they get to that particular crown jewel. So I thought about defining what resilience is, and I think even Grace spoke about it from CBK. She said, and I quote here, resilience is the ability to recover quickly, or at the same time, spring back into shape also quickly from an attack. So how resilient is your Sacco? How you as Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Chair Lady, or the CEO, or the board member of your Sacco, how quickly can you recover, and how quickly can you spring back from an attack? Why I say that is because President Trump, just when he got into office 3, 4, 5 years ago, one of the first people he relieved from duty was the former FBI director. Then he was called James Comey. He's now former FBI director. And James Comey said a very interesting comment. he said from a cybersecurity standpoint, there are only two kinds of organizations. Those who know they've been hacked and those who don't know. So you're either there. So so what that statement is saying is you have been hacked. The question then is, or let me put it this way, you have been breached. The question then is, do you know that you have been breached? And now that you know, what then are you doing about that breach that has ideally happened? So the idea when you talk about cyber resilience, we are coming from the standpoint of a breach has already happened. The question is, how do we find that person? How do we find that actor? And how do we spring back our services to enable our customers and Kenyans be able to get the services that they need? Now, if you think about an attack and what has happened in the world, sorry, let me just go back. I will stop using this. Let me use this. If you think about what has happened from the evolution of attacks, it's been quite interesting how attacks have evolved. Between 2003 to 2004, what used to happen is people used to create, I'm sure a majority of you were alive then, and you were then getting into the world and working. I may have been young at this time, but for those who are here, I'm sure you are there. What used to happen at this particular point in time is viruses used to be created. And these viruses, the main objective of these viruses was just to create discomfort. You have a flash disk, plug it into your computer stops working. Then there was the one for Kibaki at that time in 2002, 2003, for those who can remember. That was there. You put it into your laptop, and then your laptop can't boot up. You have to reinstall the operating system. That happened 10 years ago. Between 2005 and present, what we see now, the main objective in 2003, 2004 was mischief. But the motive changed as time went on. From 2005 onwards, the main motive became profit. I'm coming into your network to cause damage. My main objective is profit. Get money from you. Get money from your circles. I like what Eric talked about, how banks, we've seen the shift going down. But we're seeing from a Sacco standpoint, fraud is still maintaining at a constant value. We need to see how, as a body, as people who manage these funds for Kenyans, for me as well, because I'm a member of a couple of Saccos, how do we make sure we reduce that fraud? Objective there was profit. Another thing they were doing is identity theft. Before I continue on this, let me ask a question. This used to happen in 2005 onwards. But when was the first recorded identity theft in history? For those who are Christians, if you try to think about it, when was the first recorded identity theft in history? You remember the story of Esau and Jacob, right? Who was supposed to get the blessing? It was Esau, right? Because he was the firstborn. That time, patriarchal society, the blessing went to the firstborn child. What did Jacob do? He masqueraded as Esau. Then what did the father do? What did Isaac then do? Gave the blessing to Jacob, thinking it was Esau. That's identity theft. That is the first recorded history of identity. So cybercrime happened even in Bible times. That is a historical fact. It happened. So if it happened then, what has changed is just the mechanism of doing it. We stopped, right now you can't come put hair on yourself, no, or change your voice like how Jacob had to do it. No, but now they've changed that. Hackers have changed that narrative to find ways of capturing your identity and then using it to commit fraud for the objective as written there as profit. That has still continued from 2012 and beyond. What we see happening now is the main objective is damage, disruption, and IP theft. So they're trying to see, what is this person doing? What is this as a person doing? Let me steal that information. Let me use it for my benefit. And why is this happening? As time has gone on, and you all in this space, as time has gone on, we are living in a very complex world right now. The complexity is because your customers, myself as a member, my expectations are increasing. Kenya, he said, majority of the population is youth. People who are born between 1995 to 1997. Those are the people who are right now getting into the workforce. They are not going to walk into your branch, into your ATM to withdraw money. No, they don't have that time. That takes too long. They want to do everything in their finger. And you want to make sure you target those particular consumers, those particular potential members. So the complexity is increasing. We also see innovation. You're being pushed to innovate, to capture people like Ted. How do you make sure you can capture Ted's money so that he can invest it with me as my Sacco? How do you able to do that? I'm not going to do the traditional thing, oh, I have to come, sit in a line, fill a form. No, it needs to be at the click of a button. That innovation, what it does, it increases your digital landscape onto the internet. And that then increases your ability or susceptibility to hacking and to fraud and to cybercrime. Because as you get more into the network, more into the digital landscape, then what happens? Hackers say, okay, this Sacco has come in, let me try and get them. We also see one last thing I'll talk about on this slide is what you're seeing on the bottom right, laws and regulation. The gentleman before we had the break spoke about Madam Immaculate Kasai, the DPO office. How are you as a Sacco, as a board member, as a CEO, adhering to the laws and regulations of Kenya? Do you know the data protection laws? How are you making sure your data, Ted's data as your member, is being safeguarded? And if it isn't, what do you need to do to safeguard that particular? Because if you don't, eventually the law will catch up with you. So this complexity that is happening is what is enabling hackers be able to come in and cause damage. And as this goes on, we are seeing the challenge of securing our environment becoming more and more complex. Three things. There are many things that these hackers are doing, but three things that is happening. One, bad actors are using increasingly sophisticated attacks to compromise you. I'll give an example, and I always use this example, and I've personally done it to try and simulate this to people who have gone to visit and have come to your offices and other offices. I come, I say, hi, my name is Ted, I'm from so-and-so place, I've come to see Mr. CEO, we're coming to have a discussion on A, B, C, and D. The secretary will be like, oh, good, please have a seat. I say, before I have a seat, I was supposed to print something for him. Please take this flash disk and print for me. Oh, yeah, okay, because yes, oh, you're Ted, of course, you know, you look proper. Fine, give me the flash disk. She sticks it into her laptop, or he does, prints the information. Behind that flash disk, I've actually run a code. So as she prints, it will be blind to her. It will run the code, print the document. But I've already implanted the virus or the malware in her PC. I go have my meeting, I walk away. 2 weeks later, nothing has happened, but on her PC something is happening. 2 weeks later, I issue a command. It starts slowing down her PC. She will not remember Ted gave me a flash disk to print a document for the CEO, because Ted came to meet the chairman or the CEO of this particular organization. What does she do when her PC becomes slow? Calls IT. Wait, this thing is slow. It's not working. Come do what? Sort it out. What will the IT person do when he comes in? We log in as an administrator. Then what will I do? I will harvest those credentials, identity theft. I'll take that information and just keep quiet. Exactly what Eric said. I harvest that credentials. Now I have the admin password for your Sacco. I'll just keep quiet. I'll do nothing. 2 weeks have passed, nothing. You have no idea that was my objective at the beginning. I'll sit down, keep quiet, and just wait and see how that password or that identity is used within that Sacco's environment. And slowly and surely, I'm able to infiltrate. Bad actors are using increasingly sophisticated and simple attacks. That's because us as humans, we're very trusting. The moment I come and I name drop, I say I'm so-and-so meeting so-and-so, already you're trusting. Now that doesn't mean you don't trust people. That just means we need to have defenses in place to ensure that trusting ability is not capitalized by somebody who's bad. Number two, the digital estate has become very broad, back to what I spoke about. And then finally, you have so many things connected to the internet in your organization. People are trying to seek and harm you as a Sacco, as your entity. These are these are the challenges in securing your environment. The question then becomes, what do I need to do? How do I need to secure myself more effectively? Now, the anatomy, meaning the thinking of an attacker, has not changed. I talked about the evolution of how attacks used to happen, but the thinking of an attacker has not changed. His main objective, as the example I gave, is to come into your network. So they compromise the user. After that, they compromise the device, the example I've just given. Eventually, they establish connection into your network. They sit, become latent, and observe what is happening. As time goes by, their main objective is, the end game, is these 5 things. Business disruption. Eric gave an example about whenever fraud has happened, we end up suspending pay bills, and then now you're not able to transact. Your legitimate members start complaining. Why can't I do business? Then you call, oh, The integrator is saying it is Safaricom. Safaricom is saying it is the integrator. But who is suffering? Ted, the member, at the end of the day. That's the end game. The end game is business disruption, loss of productivity. You end up spending so much time, and I've seen the letters, writing letters, having meetings, having sessions. What do we need to do to change this? How do we work? Productivity has gone down. Data theft. I've taken the information about your customers. You've lost some element of money. Then the last one is ransom. I'll give an example of ransom. There's a hotel in Germany. I always love this example because it makes a lot of sense in terms of how ransom can be so painful to an organization. It can happen to any of us. What happens here, what happened in this example is, there was this hotel in Germany. They fired one of the IT administrators. He had done something and they let him go. But they did not do the due diligence of withdrawing his credentials into the organizations, into the system. They fired him, they let him go, he went. But he still had access. So externally, he managed to lock all the rooms of the hotel. There were about 200 rooms. You know how you have these key cards, you go, and then you lock, you punch in. So he managed to lock all the rooms of the entire hotel, all 200, and he locked them at 4 a.m. in the morning. Normally at that time, most hotels, you're all in a hotel here, normally either you're waking up, either you're checking out, or you want to do some prayers. If you do pray, you want to go to the gym, you want to do something. So he locked them. Then he called the reception. Hi, I've locked the rooms. Oh, no, you can't. This is us. You can't lock our room. You can't do that. Then she said, okay, put me on hold. Go check if you can open an empty room. So the receptionist put the phone down, walked to the room. She said she couldn't lock. She came back. Hello? Yeah, you've locked the room. I said, of course, I told you I locked the room. Why are you asking questions that I told you that I did? So long story short, eventually they ended up paying him money. The good thing with this hacker, the only good thing about this hacker is that he actually eventually unlocked the room. What the hotel had to do at the end of the day is change the entire locking system because they were ransom to that individual. He could decide to do it again in 2 months. That's the problem of identity theft. If you don't do proper cleanup in your organization, you end up losing lots of money. And we've seen that in Saccos. I see it almost every day with the Saccos Safaricom managers. You have a database administrator. You have an IT administrator who runs your entire infrastructure. You're fearful, and I say this respectfully to all of us, you're fearful of either letting him go because he's done 1 or 2 bad things, or she has done 1 or 2 bad things, or you're fearful of ensuring business continuity. So you keep him or her in your organization. What does he or she do? And I've seen this happening. What they do, they install a script in the database. It happens so many times. I've lost emotion about it because I don't know what else to do. He or she installs a script, and the script is very intelligent, runs, and we have checked this, in about 5 seconds. What it does, creates an account, debits a member's account, sends the money to M-Pesa, then deletes the record. That just takes 5 seconds. Done and dusted. We actually had an example last year. There was this particular, the database administrator had run a query where he was withdrawing 1,000 shillings every hour. Just 1,000 shillings. They don't go for big money. He won't come and withdraw one. Just 1,000 shillings, that's in a day, that's 24,000. 1,000 shillings every hour coming into his pocket. 1,000 shillings. We all ended up knowing that in 6 months. It took us, we were not monitoring that customer, but they told us 6 months later that they realized they had been losing 1,000 shillings every day for 6 months. Then they came and told us, find a way to remove that script. So we installed some tools. We were able to pick up the non-sanctioned scripts in that database. And then we eventually blocked him. What we saw happening is that he tried it again. And we asked, when we found that it was him, so we did a forensic audit, we sent it to the team and said, okay, this is the individual. It actually gave the IP address, the MAC address, the gentleman spoke about it, and the name, the actual identity. We did it and we submitted, because you can't go with that information public. So we went to the audit team, because whenever we do our services, we always make sure we have audit, compliance, and then the CFO and the CEO in a pool of emails where when we pick up some things that are very critical, we send to that group. So we sent the forensic audit to that team. Unfortunately, that person is still working for that organization. So what we do, us guys, we heighten our ability to monitor. And why that happens is because we ask, but why is he still there? Because we don't have somebody who understands our system more than this particular individual. Now you see, you laugh, but it's a reality. And this is not just for one organization, this is for multiple organizations. Main objective, ransom. You have that one individual who's doing that, holds you at ransom, one person. So we have to be able to ensure our biggest issue that we have, and I'll seek to close with this, is insider threats. Fraud is a big problem for you and for me as Kenyans and for all of us. It's what we are seeing as Safaricom. We're seeing these 10 things happening. But I want to focus on point number 7, insider threats. Insider threats in Kenya accounts for 70% of fraud in this country is insider threats. Internal fraud, 70%. Globally, it's 40%. But in Kenya, 70% of fraud is internal. What does that mean? Let me break that down. You know, sometimes you say 70%, people are like, yeah, 70%. For every 10 employees, 7 are fraudsters. That's actually what that fact means. True or false? True. For every 10 employees, 7 are fraudsters. Now, those 7 are fraudsters. I don't mean they are deliberate. It could be knowing or unknowingly, because they could be used as conduits to commit fraud in your organization. Some of them purposely actually seek to, like the example I've given of that gentleman. That's a fraudster, masquerading as an employee, earning a salary, and then drawing money from members at the same time. Eventually we blocked it, so now he's unable to do it, so it's not happening anymore, but he's still an employee. 70%. So what do we have to do to make sure that we are protecting ourselves effectively? As we continue, I'm sure some of you saw these headlines coming along. This is 2017. Low cybersecurity budgets expose Saccos. This is 2017. Sorry, this is 2019. Low budgets. Why? Because our main focus then and even now is we want to increase productivity, we want to increase profits, we want to give our members service, but we are not funding cybersecurity as an investment for us to protect that particular money. You may grow your base, but you may also be losing some of that money outside. I challenged one head of IT for Sacco in the central region of this country, and I told her, it's a lady, I told her, what if we could reduce your cyber security loss, your fraud loss, by 20% year on year? You're losing about 2 million shillings every year. What if we could reduce that by 20% year on year? In 3 years, it's all done. That means 400,000 is back into your organization as profit that you're not losing. What we are unfortunately doing is that we are getting insurance to pay for money that we lose. So we are spending money to fund fraudsters indirectly. That's theft. That's corruption. It's true, it is. So we need to find a way of us guys behaving differently. Another thing, we see from this particular article, it says most savings and credit cooperative Saccos in the country do not have a cybersecurity strategy. Sometimes the word strategy looks big. Oh, I need to have this 10-year plan. No, it can start small. How do I protect my users? How do I protect my laptop? That's a strategy. How do I protect email? How do I train my users? How do I see what is going on? I've given you already a roadmap that it can take 3 years for us to implement by those questions that I have asked. As we carry on, from the same article it says, the report dubbed Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity within Saccos 2019 also shows that most of those surveyed, 44%, set aside 100,000 shillings for cybersecurity. And that 100,000 is maybe to buy a firewall from either Sophos or Fortinet or Microtik or Cisco, something, just to make sure that you're cleaning some traffic. But that's not it. We've seen 70% of fraud is internal. That person can already be inside. So what can you do different? And then the big one that the gentleman alluded to was this one that we saw. January, I think it was 17th, this year. Why your Sacco savings are at risk. Then they broke down that particular article. We need to, as a body, as Saccos, seek to see how we can be more effective and efficient in safeguarding our assets. And Safaricom does that. We make sure we can work with you, partner with you. Eric has spoken about it. Patrick spoke about it. The CBK lady and gentleman also spoke and alluded to it. The gentleman before the break also spoke about it. That there are certain procedures and processes you need to put in place. There are 3 things, and I'll leave with this, that we all need to focus on. Just 3. Ensuring our people, that's ourselves and our staff, are adequately and sufficiently trained. And the gentleman who was right before me spoke about it. People, how do you train your people? How do you make sure that they're cyber aware? Do you know the health index of your staff members in your organization? For them to know this is This can be potentially damaging. I'll give this example. For Safaricom, pre-COVID, before COVID, 2020, before and backwards, Safaricom used to have sports. Every year we had what we call Safaricom Olympics. It was dubbed Safari Olympics, where staff members would be organized into teams and would just play with each other. Some team bonding exercise. We had that running for years. Then COVID happened, we stopped. So it never happened. This year in February, our chief human resource manager sent out an email. Hi staff members, COVID is almost into recession. We can now do what? Come in, join, let's meet again as an entire office and let's have Safari Olympics. Please click this link to register. It was a phishing email. A phishing email meaning here it was an email sent to trick employees to click that link. The head of cybersecurity actually clicked that link. And he actually approved the email to be sent, but he clicked it. That tells you the desire we have as a people because of that was to meet. So we leveraged on the ability, on the human aspect of wanting to connect. And 70% of Safaricom employees actually failed that phishing test, which means 70% of us, and we're 7,000, had to actually do a phishing training again so that they can be cyber aware. Because we regularly do them. Every quarter there's a phishing campaign, there's a phishing email. Right now, our year ended. I'm sure some of you saw our results. It was announced last week. We normally have an email that comes right about this time about bonus. That one, normally 80% of the staff members fail, 80%. Because anything that you want to know how you're making money, you'll always automatically click. So we leverage on those abilities of people to click such emails, to click such things, so that we can know the health index of our staff members. Because that is, the people who walk in and out of your office are your biggest liability. How do you then empower them to make sure they can protect your organization? People. Number two, processes. You see, all these things are strategy, and it's being broken down into very simple, minute tasks. Processes. How do you safeguard your processes? How do you make sure your processes and your policies are strong enough to protect you against cybercrime? I've not talked about buying anything yet. This is just processes. Do you have a minimum password numbers? Do you have a minimum password policy in place? Is it 8 digits? Does it have alphanumeric, lowercase, and uppercase? And here I'll double click on this. Some of us have a long password, but it's the same password. For example, Ted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then after 90 days, change your password. Ted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, you've not really changed that password. You've manipulated that, but you've not changed the password. Do you have policies in place to make sure that you can't use the same syntax of characters for a new email? That is a configuration. You've not bought anything yet. That in itself makes sure that you're able to protect yourself within your organization. So policies and processes. Finally, is on technology. When your people are trained, when you've done your policies and processes effectively, then we come to the technology. Do we need to buy? Do we need to enhance? Do we need to collaborate? Do we need to outsource? Those are now the questions that then come into place. And I'll close with this last slide. On the left, you see what attackers are doing today on a day-to-day basis. On the left, what are attackers doing today? Number one, they're trying to breach your network and monetize. On the right, we're seeing what your cybersecurity people or your IT people are doing. Number one, they have 4 hours of meetings. Number two, status updates. Where are we? The system was down. The firewall is not working. The application is not working. Number three, they need to add notes to the support tickets they have raised. That's what your IT team is doing. 4, timesheets. What time did they come in? What time did they go out? 5, HR mandated training. You need to train. You need to go and send a PC or a laptop to one of our branches sitting 20 kilometers away. 5, update the decks. The CEO or the chairperson of that particular institution needs an update on our systems. Number 5, update policies. And then the last thing they do in a day, 23 minutes of InfoSec work. InfoSec is information security. That's what they're spending their time on. But on the left, what are they doing? The whole day, they're seeking to spend time to breach your network. The question I pose to you, who will win? Is it your IT team or is it the hacker? And that's where we need to get to a place where we're asking ourselves, what's our strategy? How will we move forward? How will we make sure we secure our Saccos, my money as TED? and your money and your relatives and your friends, how will you secure that money? Do you outsource? Do you partner? Do you embrace organizations such as Safaricom that can be able to offer these services to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. One was intensive, the other one was extensive. Ted deserves another clap. And Ted, I assure you that they'll be seeing you offline if you are available. It is almost 2:30. Apologies for that, but I think it was worth it. It was worth it, and some of you will tell us that you needed more time with them. All is not lost. Immediately after lunch, I think now we'll be able to ask them questions. Let's break for lunch. We give ourselves 1 hour. Ensure that you have the meal cards. Yvonne, would you like to guide us where lunch is?
Good afternoon once again. Lunch